Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Divorce Unplugged podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Nicole Cox. You may know me on socials as the Family Law Liaison.
Hi, everybody. Keegan Burke. You may recognize me as Divorceology on all the socials. I'll do my disclosure. Not a lawyer, not lawyering, not your lawyer. This isn't legal advice. This is a conversation, all things divorce and custody. But want to make sure you realize that you should be doing your own checking and own investigation with legal counsel, as we are not that.
Exactly. I am a lawyer, but I am not your lawyer. And we are not giving legal advice today. And actually, today we are going to go toe to toe with some opposing views, which is going to be really interesting. So,
Yeah, let's get into this. Heads up. We know that we agree so often, but more often than not, we disagree. And I think that's really the premise for why we started this whole thing. It's what is the viewpoint and perspective of the other side? And I think if you're going to go into battle, you're going to go into a divorce, you have to have an awareness of what the other side experiences, what the other side thinks, and how you're going to manage your case or your situation with those considerations. So, we've formulated a bunch of topics that generally have a man's perspective and a woman's perspective. And so today, I'm going to make the argument for us men, right? I'm going to advocate for us as men. I'm going to socialize the things that I see, things I've experienced, things that I see with men that have helped, and make the case. But at the same time, gentlemen, if you're listening, really think and pay attention to the things that Nicole is saying, because she's going to give us an eyes and ears into the things that we need to be aware of on these topics. So let's get into it. First topic.
But one second, Keegan.
Uh,
I will say I
Yeah.
do have female clients that may be taking your argument because they've been put in a position where they're the ones that are having to support. So it's not always the male and the female at the same time. But yes, let's do this because it's going to be fun.
Sure. No, I totally understand that. So the first topic, we actually talk about it pretty frequently, but I think it's a hot one, and that is false allegations versus believing the victim, right? And so, in my opinion, from a man's perspective, it is where it is all too often abused, all too often used, and it is call it the silver bullet, the nuclear option. It's the thing that is most devastating to particularly men, because it gives the opposing side who makes the claim, true or not, complete control of the case. And that's, from a man's perspective, the most dangerous element of divorce and custody battles is when allegations, especially if untrue, are most devastating to the man.
They can be devastating to both. I'll give you that. It can be most devastating to the man. I think when we talk about false allegations, there's a certain client that I work with that I can tell that is immediately not making false allegations. Okay, if that makes sense. So, and also when I come up
Yeah.
against false allegations with either a man or a woman that I'm coaching, then I immediately just extinguish those false allegations or try to by, hey, there's a course you can take. Why don't you look into SoberLink? Why don't, there's all kinds of different ways that if someone's making false allegations against you, that you can prove that it really is a false allegation. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but that is definitely a strategy that I use. And
Yeah,
then
no,
the
I agree.
there's that. The other thing is that my argument is really honestly, when we're talking about false allegations, we're not just talking about like smaller allegations. You're talking about like actual abuse from the standpoint that I just received from your conversation is you're talking about false allegations of abuse, and that's really pretty interesting because a woman that just wants to come out immediately with very little, I would say, evidentiary behind her, and say that she's been being abused, it's really hard to prove. I know you think it isn't, but it really actually is. And speaking to these false allegations, I have so many female clients that go into custody evaluations or different types of evaluations, and the evaluator doesn't believe them. right? So I think there's two ways to look at it. Like if you're dealing with somebody who has false allegations against them, then you need to make sure that you have a lot of evidence to prove that you can go back far into their lifetime. I mean, a lot of the times we use pictures, right? We use a lot of photographs and videos. Can you get like information from that now? Yes.
Yeah, you absolutely can, and I think it's a big point that is, you can leverage it to defend yourself. But my gripe is the onset of allegations, right? And the general tendency, and I think it's relatively normal that folks have really attached themselves over the last several years to the Me Too movement, right? Just because it's said, it should be believed, and I think that that happens way more frequently than it should. And I think the other problem with false allegations from a man's perspective is it's sort of like squeezing toothpaste out of the tube. You can't put it back in the tube. And the general tendency of courts, in my experience, is well, we will figure it all out and we can prove it right or wrong. But until we do, we're going to eliminate or remove the person who's accused falsely from the equation. We're going to give temporary restraining orders. We're going to grant temporary complete control of custody. We're going to, require that the man leave the home and maintain the home. And so I think that the problem maybe if as we kind of unpack this live is that ultimately, fine. Yes, you can do things to defend against false allegations. There are some things that sometimes that false allegations land and stick and are significantly impactful to the man and a woman, right? False allegations in general. The problem is it never gets resolved fast enough. Right. So we don't get to an evidentiary hearing. We don't get due process. We don't get resolution and the ability to fix it where you haven't harmed potentially a relationship with a child or children, and or you don't get the ship righted fast enough,
Or a
and the
reputation
steamrolling
in
effect of those
business.
allegations.
You can ruin a reputation in business. And I
Yeah,
hear what you're saying. But I honestly believe
100%.
and my argument here is that when we're talking about false allegations, like there's a level of false allegations, right? But the one big one, like when you say the silver bullet, we're talking about abuse. Okay. So I think it's very
Yeah,
underreported. And I think that if a judge has the ability to go back and look, you have to look at the history of the case. Is there a long drawn out history of abuse and it was never reported, then yes, I do believe that allegation is correct and true because most women are not going to blow up their life and make false allegations. So this is the interesting part of the timing of the allegation. The timing of it. Does it just happen when everything blows up? Or do we see that there has been constant, continuous abuse going on from the beginning of the relationship that was just never reported? Now we have a woman that has a
totally.
trauma bond that needs help and needs to get out.
Totally agree. Totally agree. But I again, I think that's the flaw in the system, right? And why, you try to avoid this system at all costs. But judges don't have time to really underwrite. They barely ever read the pleadings.
I
They
know.
tend to take at first blush the statements made, and then by the time you get into it, the damage is done, and that's the problem I have with it. And by the way, this goes to the other point that you kind of I think is important. False allegations no matter what level, are devastating to a man, especially if it's an abusive allegation of any kind, right? Verbal, coercive, physical, emotional, all those things, right? And it's one of those things that you can't really correct. And more importantly, we never do. The woman, and again, I'm taking the man's side on this one, the
You
woman
sure
is
are.
never, the woman who makes a false allegation I have yet to see be held accountable for false allegations. And I think to the end my point, accountability of making a false statement or a false allegation of abuse, the repercussions of that, if you can prove it's false, should be massive so that it scares people away from false allegations. And more importantly, it's just as detrimental to those being abused, right? So Men
Okay,
and women should be screaming from the rooftop.
now you're hitting on a good point. The point is it's going to hurt each person
100%.
somehow.
Yeah,
Yes.
100%. Yes.
Whether
So,
it's a financial economic hit, whether it's a reputational hit because you have goodwill in a business, all those things. That's why I'm saying when people are really women are really being abused. And it is
yeah.
still October abuse month. I'm going to put that out there, and I am a survivor. When you're really actually and it's serious abuse, it takes a minute to come out. And it's not going to
Yes.
be all of a sudden. You're going to endure so much until you can't anymore.
Yes, and I will finish the point on abuse from a man's perspective, and specifically false abuse allegations. Men, you have to be accountable for your behavior, what you say, when you say it, how you say it, while you're in your relationship, after you get out of the relationship, the way you correspond. Everything you do is going to be viewed through a microscopic lens. And okay, men, if you get angry, okay, fine. But like, you really need to start thinking about what could be perceived or misused. You get into arguments, don't be screaming on the phone. If you're on speakerphone while
That's
she's
true.
out with her girlfriends, well, now you've got witnesses, right? And it's always, and listen, the reality is relationships aren't perfect. Men or women are not perfect. But I can tell you that the problem with divorce and or separation and custody is those imperfections are magnified on levels that you can't imagine. And so all I would say to men is this: be a good human being, make sure you're not abusive, even verbally, be considerate of your actions, of your statements, and all the things, but really keep in the back of your mind that if this is the direction it's going, there will be an opportunity, maybe not immediately, to have your day to prove your innocence, just as long as you have your ducks in order, which goes to what we always talk about is have a coach. Make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you know how you're going to defend against it. Document, video, all the things, right? But don't be abusive. Protect those that are abused and stop making false allegations, men or women, because it's such a bad scene for both parties, but I think ultimately for the kids, because a person who isn't abusive gets ripped from them overnight.
Okay. I mean, that was obviously a lot. And I agree
Yeah.
with you. And I definitely encourage my clients not to make false allegations. Like I said, I go pretty deep into what I'm looking at. Is this really an allegation? Yeah, I've gone through 18 videos and that man was absolutely abusive. So I will stand by you, and that's what we will argue in a custody evaluation. And moving forward, we'll argue coercive control. But I hear what you're saying, and everybody needs to understand that false allegations can be detrimental to each party.
Yep. And I would even concede that for those that are being abused, anybody with a brain and a heart realizes that we feel for those people and we want them to be helped as needed and as they should be. And so that I
Absolutely.
think we can at least agree on that front.
Oh my god,
Um,
if you are being abused, run, don't walk.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Which is a whole separate topic around healing and management of those types
Well,
of and
I
abuse
have
comes in all
that
kinds of
idea.
forms.
Pack your
Yeah.
bags, have a small bag packed, protect yourself, protect your kiddos, and get out. But that's another episode. Okay,
Yeah.
next
So,
step.
yeah, next one, I think it's sort of parlays because something you said was, you know, people aren't necessarily going to blow up their relationships. And I think that's partially true, but child support,
Oh,
fairness versus obligation, and I know that women pay child support. I know that there are women who earn more in a household. But I think generally it is more often than not that the man is the wage earner or earning more. And ultimately, at the end of the day, my bottom line position on this is child support is a completely dysfunctional mechanic. I think that the way we view it, I think it's the way that we calculate it. I think that the way that it's applied is an absolute travesty and disruptive to the entire country, and both for men and women, because one, it's an incentive in some situations to destroy a relationship, but two, it also is an incentive to try to
Oh,
leverage control where it doesn't need to be
okay, you
asserted.
know we're going to battle here, right?
Yeah, I'm
This
ready.
is war. This is
Yeah,
war. Okay,
ready.
first of all, the thing about child support is that women, okay, have the babies, right? We put so much effort into making sure the family's put together, everybody's well fed, everybody's taking the kids are on time to places, all the things. We put so much work into things. Maybe in some circumstances, a woman is actually working for the husband or the family business. Okay. Now she's not getting paid, but she's working for the business. I mean, there's so many things that women do to pour into their family and their husband, and it makes me want to throw up right now. And if I'm going to start saying things, I'm afraid we might get canceled. So I have to stop myself and breathe. But let me tell you something else. If we didn't have child support, we would have every I'm not going to say the words I want to. Every Peter Pan, unresponsible man running around and creating children and not taking responsibility for it. Then what? The moms have to sit home? The single moms have to go and work 3 jobs just to put food in the kids' mouths?
Okay,
I got
so
animated, but it's true.
okay, so this is where I hear what you're saying, right? And I think in a traditional home environment where father is working, mother has put her job aside and is raising a family. Like the reality is motherhood, being a mother is a full-time job in and of itself, right?
Yes.
But again, separating that from child support as a child necessity item, not an equalization, right? Because equalization to me is you stayed together, you figured out how to stay together, you made the relationship work.
Okay, but what if somebody got thrown out of the house with a 1.5-year-old and didn't have an option? That wasn't
Well,
equalization.
no, but there are spousal support, there are other support mechanisms, and there are time um, barriers that I think can be applied there, right? Like a get on your feet period, a supplemental piece to it. Child support all too often is viewed solely for the purposes of equalizing the experience for the kid from one house to the next. Perfect example. Let's say that person with a 1.5-year-old gets thrown out of the house. Let's say it's a woman, she gets a new relationship, that person is extremely well to do.
It was me, Keegan. It's part of
I
my story,
well,
and I've told
I'm
everybody.
saving
But
I'm saving the privacy.
I've seen it 100 times. I don't care. I'm happy to tell everybody in the whole world what happened to me, okay?
Okay.
So, I
Mhm.
see child support in a much different angle. I
Sure.
mean, that the man gets to run around owning homes all over the country, partying with women, taking jets, doing all the things, and barely giving enough to make sure that the child has a roof over her head, gets a few extracurriculars, and has, some food. While mom is trying to get back on her feet, and I'm not just saying
Mm,
me, I'm saying any woman in
sure.
general is trying to get back on her feet because she's probably been abused. She's probably got a lot of trauma bonds. She's probably trying to pull her life back together. And I think this man owes it to her.
Whew. So
You can tell I'm in a bad mood today, can't you?
you're lucky I like you, and I'm going to take a
And
a
I
softer approach to this because I am sympathetic to those scenarios. I am unsympathetic to the scenarios where mother has education, has a professional capability, opts not to be a wage earner, and or is using custody as a means to drive more support, right? I want money, but I can't work or I'm not going to work because I have the kids. While the father is going, well, I want the kids and I can take the kids and I have, the ability to take more custody. And so you can go work and you can go do the things you need to do because to me, we're
yes.
joint parents. You have a joint obligation to raise the child. And here's the thing: necessity and discretionary spending on support is where we run into problems. Because if I'm writing a check to mom for child support and it's not going to the child, because that happens a lot, right? And we could say, "Oh, well, she's took it from here, and so really it all goes to the same spot." No. If it's really not going to the child and or the child's necessities are $1,000 a month. Let's just use that as a number. But because dad makes more than mom, it should be 2,000. I think that's an absolute garbage calculation. The reality is the man or the woman, the wage earner is where they are because of either a professional designation, a familial element, or hard work, or whatever it is. A person, man or woman, should not be penalized for being successful.
Okay. And okay. But also, I think what we're talking about is you're talking about two people that are actually sane and normal
Yes.
and co-parent together. You're not talking about somebody that's been found to be unfit, that doesn't show up ever at all. So I think we're thinking about, two different scenarios right now, which is what we're not agreeing on is that if somebody just decides to be not present and
Well,
do all those things, then I think that absolutely child support is warranted.
Well, yes and no, because in my mind, if you peel those things back, right? A child's survival, right? Let's just boil it down to survival, necessity, right? School, health, maybe, sports, right?
Roof
The
over their
basic
head, a
necessities.
car to drive in, going to the doctors, some extracurriculars, clothes, all those things.
Yeah, fine. Fine, but there's still a number there. And that number should be removed from what is available to either side, right? The child's expense is the child's expense. That child costs a certain amount of money to raise. And both parties are responsible for the time that they have with their child. Like each side has to have a home, has to have a roof, has to have all the things. And both parties, at some point, again, this is a supplemental piece, should be self sustaining, have the home, have the things that the child can be there. And by the way, I even go so far as to say, if after a certain amount of time, the, let's say the mother in this situation or the lesser earner isn't capable of creating that stability and the other is and they're saying I want more time, well then we should be considering, well, where should the child go? Because if the other person can't get their stuff together, can't get an income, can't create the stability they need economically, and the other side is arguing for more time and that's the argument around the economics, then we need to make a switch,
I
right?
don't agree at
Okay,
all.
I'll take the child and mom can go get a job, mom can go get her house, can go get her things in order. I've supplemented, right, the adjacent piece for that person to get on their feet. That's
Well,
not
I
child support, that's spousal or relational support.
I don't agree with your argument at all. There is an amount of money that gets imputed every time you go into court, and that is what they use. They
Mhm.
use that number. Okay, so you're already making an income, whether you are or not, or getting back on your feet. That's what you were imputed. And we could do this for a really long time. And I appreciate what you have to say, but I don't agree with it. And I think until you've been on the other side and you've coached women or you've actually been that person, that you would
L l Let me ask
maybe
you this,
have a
do you
different idea about it.
so let me ask you this then. Do you think that it's appropriate that the receiving party makes as much money from child support that the paying party does on a net basis? Do you think that the person not working or whatever on a 50% custody schedule should be making the exact same take home money that the paying party is? That because that's what the calculation comes out to 9 times out of 10.
It's like, well, in different states, but I think also there's like a third of what the person that's making the most money, so you're taking a third of what they make out of their income a month is basically what the calculation comes out to as well. So
Right, but they still and unless you're making like FU money, right? It
so
nets
that's what
down
we're
after
talking about, my
taxes.
friend, is we're talking about people that are
Well,
making FU money. And I know that's why I
no, I
think,
see.
uh,
Yeah, well, I'm
there's a
talking about the
difference.
everyday John, Joe, Sam, Susie, and Sally, right? Like the reality is the support is so burdensome on the paying party, and incentivizes the receiving party so much to argue for custody because the financial incentive is there, that it perpetuates the argument. And that's where I think that the system is flawed all the way through. I can see your points, right? They're valid in that, there's a certain element of support and maintenance that needs to be in place. But at some point, right, there's a pure baseline expense element that should be applied here, not just because the guy is making a little better than, above average earning, that he just gets penalized on a compounding basis.
Right, and I see what
That's
you're
my
saying,
opinion.
and I think I've seen extenuating circumstances, and maybe in
Sure.
some places that I've lived or some clients that I've worked with where it's like, "What? So these guys get to run around and just get, like, with a ton of money, just get all these women pregnant and then not pay child support and then leave them?" I don't think so.
Again, I'm not, and this is a great, it's funny because we could talk for literally days on this topic. I'm not saying that child support shouldn't exist. I'm just saying that, again, just because you have a child and you make a ton of money, that the mother of that child is entitled to more money just because you've had a child with her. That to me is sort of nuts, but I disagree, or I agree with you that, like, no, you shouldn't be throwing women to the curb. You shouldn't be throwing your child to the curb. You have a responsibility. If you're going to go do that and have kids, there's going to be a responsibility element to it. That's sane logic.
Mhm.
But at some point, you have, like, it's not attached to earning capability and earning capacity. It's what is the cost of the kid? Period. Like, there's a hard cost. It doesn't, it's not, it's like, if I married a megastar and we had a kid, I shouldn't get more money from her for the child just because we have a child together. Like, because she makes millions of dollars.
Well,
I just
different
that doesn't
states
sit with me.
look at it different, okay?
True, true. That's fair. That's fair.
Different
I just
states
think
look at it
I think
different.
the support system's messed up all the way through.
I know, and I think we should jump to the next subject.
Yeah, we only have time for one more.
Right.
So, let me think
What's the
here
good
because,
one?
oh, okay, here's one for you. Do you think that oh, we've talked about
I
this one.
like mental health and
Um,
gender perception. Let's run with that. That one's pretty good.
oh, all right, yeah, let's go with it. So, the question is, how does gender perception play a role in divorce and custody? And I guess you can give me the woman's perspective, and I'll give you the man's, and or argue it or agree with you.
Okay, so the man's argument or my argument, I'm not sure where to go with that. But on mental health issues, I mean, I have seen it go both ways. But I do think that possibly the males do get hit with more of a coercive control. There's something, there's a mental health issue. But not to say that a lot of opposing party doesn't love to call a woman crazy. Let's just be honest. So I'm not exactly sure where the split is there. I don't know how you feel about that, but it's probably easier when you're using text message, emails, and videos to show that the male is maybe more unstable.
Yeah, I think that both sides, from call it mental health perspective, and maybe that's the wrong way to tag it for us, but you know, I think that both sides get labeled, right,
Or
if you will,
fitness.
right.
Fitness, we could
Yeah,
call it
the
fitness.
the men are angry and controlling, the women are hysterical and unstable, right? And I
Right.
think it's probably realistic that both sides are something there, right? Men are built different than women, and we respond to stress and strain and these things a little bit differently. But I think the problem is both of these things get exaggerated and or misused, right? So like a woman being considerate of her child's feelings, emotions, stability, whatever, and wanting to kind of have a say because historically in the relationship she has gets labeled something negative. And same thing with a man going, "Hey, listen, like I've been the decision maker or whatever, or I'm, I am emphatic about some topic." He's angry and controlling, and it's like, and or the man has, you know, been an adjacent party to the child rearing, or the
Mhm.
the homemaking, but
Mhm.
hasn't been in a position where he needs to make a decision, is going, "Hey, like, now that we both have to make a decision, I get a decision," right? And that gets labeled as controlling and or, outrageous. And so I think it goes both ways from a labeling perspective. But
And
this kind of plays
perception.
a role in this whole. Yeah, exactly where I was going.
Perception. So what's the
Yep.
perception? So a woman can, and I've seen this in the last couple days. A woman can do something, make a move, say something that thinks is fairly, I don't know, not like that. It's innocuous. It's not that bad. And then all of a sudden it gets perceived as some big blown up, situation because every man wants to look at a woman and say, "Oh my God, see, she's crazy and now she scares me because she does this or said this." No, it's because you guys can't seem to understand when we say something or the way we act doesn't have anything to do with our mental health. It it just everybody perceives the other person, I think, in a negative light.
Yeah, divorce in custody brings out the worst perceptions because it's always magnified, it's always misused. And if people could get to a point where they recognize, hey, your individual feelings, thoughts, emotions are not the priority, the children are, if children are involved, then I think, generally speaking, the parents agree more often than they want to admit. And also, I think that if we were to go into these situations recognizing early that where you are once divorce and custody starts is not where you are when the relationship is in place. It's a completely brand new experience and world for both parties. And I think that is kind of the pivot point where things get a lot easier and a lot better for both sides the sooner both sides recognize it. So,
Well, also, I think, and yes, you made an important point, and that is what coaches do: is we
mhm.
keep their emotions, our clients' emotions, in check so that they don't appear to look like there's coercive control, mental health issues, any kind of the things that the long list of things that could happen. So that's why a coach is helpful because before you send that text message, before you send that email, all those things, or don't even get on the telephone until you've calmed yourself down, those types of
Yes.
things.
100%. I completely agree. And I think to that point, right, those labels that we were talking about for a man and a woman, a coach is going to be going into these situations knowing that you're already predetermined or pre-labeled in the or eyes of the court and the eyes of the professional. And so everything you need to be doing needs to be managing against falling into that bucket that you
Right.
likely will be in, right? It's almost like you need to put a defense on immediately, right? In the
Right.
way you operate.
Right. You're
So,
walking in and you're going to look like a crazy mom and you're going to look overly protective and, all those things. And you're also probably going to look like you're trying to parentally alienate or interfere. And those are all the things and the labels that moms get.
yep, totally. Yeah, men too. So, all right, we're gonna have to keep going because we've got a lot of other topics on this
I know.
another time, and I'm sure we'll cover these in a broader capacity again because they're hot topics. They're live. They continue to evolve. We continue to see more of it. You guys continue to experience more of it. So I'm sure we'll get questions around it. But thank you to everybody for listening,
Mhm.
and hopefully this was helpful because really every one of these situations has a completely opposing perspective. And it's not that, both are wrong and or one is wrong, one is right. It's that there are different ways to look at everything. So you have to keep that in mind.
And each person is going through something on the other side.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
until next time, like, listen, subscribe, do all the things. We thank you and we'll talk to you soon.
See you guys soon.